What exactly does effective leadership mean? And what can effective leadership do for us and those people around us? Fundamentally, how can you become a better leader? Well, on this week's episode of GetPsyched, we're going to be looking just at that, and we're going to be looking at the psychology and power of leadership and how you can improve your leadership qualities. Hey guys, welcome to another week's episode of GetPsyched, and like I said, this week we're going to be looking at the psychology of leadership, the power of leadership, and how you can improve your leadership qualities. So let's start from the very beginning, and let's start to think a little bit about what exactly a leader is and different kinds of leaders. Now, when you think of the word leader, you might think of a couple of things. You might think of political leaders or sports captains, for example. You also might think of adventurers or company CEOs. In truth, it doesn't really matter in what context you perceive leaders to be in. What is universal and across all different kinds of leaders is that they share certain principles. Things such as helping others to do the right thing and making difficult decisions, going against the crowd at sometimes if it's necessary, and leading by a positive example and showing fortitude and resistance even in the most challenging of circumstances. And I think that we can all agree that those kind of qualities are exactly what we expect in good leadership and good leaders. Now, an understanding of leadership and leaders is not just given to general society or the general population. Psychology also has an interest in understanding a little bit more about leadership and who good leaders are and what they possess. Now, original research and psychological research with regards to leadership saw factors such as charisma, physical attractiveness, and intelligence as being the primary factors in establishing a good leader. And as a result, this research inferred that good leaders forced other people to do exactly what they wanted. Now, this was quite early psychological research in leadership, but it did find that. It found that leaders are people that can make other people do what they want. And this research inferred that no matter what the circumstances are, if a leader continues to show authority and be the voice of authority and continue to keep people in line, then they can achieve any outcome. However, more recently in psychological research, leadership has taken on a new understanding, and new qualities of leadership have started to be understood. Understanding the group objectives and understanding the individuals in the group, being more collaborative with those people in the group, has been found to be of better quality for leaders than this authoritarian nature of leadership that was initially understood in early psychological research. Fundamentally, recent research in psychology has found that leadership is not a top-down mentality. And instead, in order to develop as a leader and to utilize effective leadership skills, a leader has to integrate themselves within the group that they're leading. Now, some of the most powerful people in history have used this concept more recently to establish effective leadership and to, in theory, control a group to align with their thinking patterns. Now, we can use a pretty kind of general understanding of this when we look at sports teams. And if you look at a sports captain, you would expect now that that leader, that sports captain who's the leader of that team, to really be working the hardest and giving the most in order to lead by example. In order, fundamentally, he'll put himself, or she will put herself, in the middle of the group in order to establish that leadership position. Now, in a more serious format, American presidents have used this concept to establish leadership amongst the American people. Now, it's true that politicians all over the world have used this technique to establish themselves within a group in order to impose strong leadership, but I'm going to use America as an example first. Now, during 9/11, George W. Bush used these principles of integrating himself within the group in order to establish effective leadership. He used terms such as "those guys" and "attacked us" in order to align himself with the group, the American people in this case, and establish effective leadership. He didn't use authority, he didn't use a top-down mentality in order to impose his leadership. What he tried to do was he tried to integrate himself within the group. Now, I'm by no means aligning myself with any political party or any political individual, and you might have your own thoughts on George W. Bush, that's fine. But what I'm trying to say is that he's used certain principles of leadership in order to make himself an effective leader at that time. Now, in today's society, when we think of leadership, one of the key things that we think about is charisma. And as I've already said, the recent psychological research has really established a new understanding of leadership. And with that has come a new understanding of charisma. Fundamentally, charisma and the importance of charisma have been given negative connotations since after World War II. Now, this is largely due to the charismatic nature of Hitler, who managed to persuade an entire nation, or for the most part, a large part of that nation, to his cause by being a charismatic individual with leadership qualities. So we've talked quite a lot about the psychology of leadership and the leader as an individual, but what about the group that they're leading? How does that group influence leadership qualities in an individual? Well, research has shown that the strength and quality of the group has a direct correlation to the strength and quality of the leader. Fundamentally, a leader does not stand alone, they stand as part of the group. And if the group does not have a strong identity and a strong purpose, then the leader cannot impose their leadership qualities in order to push that group forward. So what I'm saying here is that having a good leadership quality or having good leadership qualities simply really isn't enough. The group that you're trying to lead has to have a strong identity and a strong purpose also. And if you ever get the chance, you should try and watch the BBC prison study. Sometimes you can get those clips on YouTube. I don't really think you can get the full thing on YouTube, but what I will do is I'll tag some descriptions, some links in the description down below for you to try and access those clips and see that study. It was a study conducted by the BBC that tried to replicate some of the settings and some of the contexts of the Zimbardo prison study, which some of you might be familiar with. The Zimbardo prison study consisted of two groups. Zimbardo created a group called the guards and a group called the inmates. And the study went as follows. He just let the prison or the people do what they wanted in that prison environment. Now that study actually only lasted a couple of days because it was all out chaos. But the BBC tried to replicate it in a bit more of an ethical environment. It had very similar context. There was a group of guards and a group of prisoners. And the long story short is that the prisoners actually excelled as a group over the guards because they had a strong leadership, but fundamentally because they had a strong identity and a strong purpose. The group of guards didn't really have an identity, they didn't have a purpose, they didn't even really want to be guards, whereas the prisoners had a strong identity in wanting to move past the guards and progress. They established an appropriate leader, an effective leader, and were able to grow as a result. Now this is a perfect example of how strong leadership requires a strong group to be led. Now what you've probably understood from this video is that leadership is actually hugely complex. It's not as simple as being charismatic and being attractive and being intelligent. It actually comes under a number of different qualities. Let alone the group that's actually being led has to have a strong identity and a strong purpose as well. Okay guys, thanks so much for watching this week's episode of Get Psyched. This week we've been looking at the psychology and power of leadership and some kind of tips and steps on how you can improve your leadership qualities. I hope you enjoyed the video guys and hopefully catch you next week.